Okay, welcome back. We have a fully functioning OpenShift cluster. There it is, sitting right there outside on a nice raw cut piece of walnut. Not that that matters. Oh, and there's a little bug crawling next to it. So there's our happy little single node OpenShift cluster. Let's now go ahead and finish configuring it and make it into something useful. Okay, so here we are. We're on the screen where the install had just completed. I'm going to move some things around here and get back to the log post. So the next thing that we want to do, and this is just a utility script that's part of my lab management stuff, is this lab CLI dash dash post. It's going to do some things just to clean up some of the install and set a few configuration settings. So there it's deleting pods that are in a completed state. It's deleting any, like if there's any of these installer pods that were hung in an error state, those aren't an issue. They just need to be cleaned up. So that's what this does. The next thing is, like I showed you, if you take the URL that you were given to your OpenShift cluster, it's a self-signed certificate. So the next utility script is going to trust the certificate of that cluster so that you don't have to mess with, having to always click trust this cert or something like that in your browser. It's going to ask you for the admin password for your workstation because it needs to do this as root. And what it's doing, because I'm on a Mac, it's actually injecting those certificates into my trust store. And there's two. It's getting the one from the API, it's getting the one from the console. As far as I know, they're actually the same cert, but I'm grabbing both anyway. Okay. So now I should be able to run lab CLI dash dash console, and it will pop open my browser and take me right there to my OpenShift cluster. Okay, now at this point, you could log in with the kubeadmin user and that random string password that it spit out for you at the end of the installation process, but we're not going to do that. Okay, so don't do that right now. What we're going to do instead is we're going to create a cluster admin user. And so this lab CLI dash dash user dash I says initialize. And what it does, what it's going to set up an HT password installation or a HT password authentication provider for your OpenShift cluster. And it's also going to delete that kubeadmin user because you don't want to leave that one laying around. Once your cluster is installed, you really should delete that default kubeadmin user because it's just not a good practice to leave it laying around with that randomized password. So I'm going to give him a password. It's now creating that password. All right, so it just created the secret. This warning, user admin not found, don't worry about that. That's just because we're doing this cluster role binding to make it a cluster admin. And because the user's never logged in before, that record doesn't exist. So it's going to create it. That's why this is just a warning and not an error. All right, let's also go ahead and create a non-privileged user. So I'm going to run the dash dash user without a dash I because it's already initialized. If I do the dash I again, it's going to reset it. And I'm not going to do a dash A, which says make this an admin user. I'm just doing a dash U equals my dev user. You can make this whatever you want. In fact, I'm going to make it C Groover for me. Give it a password. And now I've got two users. Okay, one other thing. I'm going to do the lab CLI dash dash console again. And it's going to pop open the browser and take me to that. If I try to log in right now, it's probably going to fail. Yeah. See, that's because the operator is restarting and it's recreating the OpenShift authentication pieces. So be patient here. Give it a couple of minutes for that operator to restart and consume the HT password secret that was created. It'll refresh itself here in just a bit and you'll be able to log into your cluster. In the meantime, let's go ahead and install the host path provisioner lab CLI dash dash host path. And this is just going to go out and grab the latest version of the host path provisioner and the certificate manager, and it's going to install those into your cluster. You could do this through Operator Hub, but because I create and destroy clusters so often, I just created a helper script to do this for me. So it's going to install the certificate manager, which is a dependency for the host path provisioner. It's going to install the host path provisioner operator, and then it's going to create a storage class for that provisioner. And just to make sure everything's working, it's going to go ahead and create a persistent volume claim for the internal image registry in this OpenShift cluster and provision storage for it. So when this is done and we go back and we log into our OpenShift cluster, we should see a persistent volume claim with a bound persistent volume for the internal image registry. This will take a few more seconds to complete here. So while that's doing its thing, we can come back over here and see if that operator, it's in the middle of, it's refreshing the console now. So this is it's gonna be just a couple more minutes while everything here finishes refreshing. All right, there's our host path CSI. The instance of host path provisioner was just created. There's the registry PVC persistent volume claim, and it just patched the image registry. Let's see if our console's back up yet. There we go. Let's see if our authentication server is restarted. All right, look at that. We're logged in to our OpenShift cluster. There it is. We've got a persistent volume claim, a storage class. You'll notice that persistent volume claim is still in a waiting state. Actually, if we go look at it, it's because it doesn't actually create a persistent volume until something tries to use it. It's waiting for the image registry to restart with its new configuration. Once it does, then it will bind to that persistent volume claim. You see it just went away from a pending state. That's because our image registry is probably, yep, it's no longer in the list of things that are starting. So if we look at storage and persistent volumes, there we go. Look at that. Our registry persistent volume claim is bound to a persistent volume that was automatically created for us by the host path provisioner. So here you go. You now have a fully functioning OpenShift cluster. If you see any errors here in the status, they should clear up after a while. It may thrash around a little bit while it's getting everything settled. One other thing that I'll point out to you is if you shut this thing down within the next 24 hours, when you start it back up, it may not come back up because of an expired certificate. If that happens, if you power this off and you power it back on and it's just not coming up, it's not coming up, it's not coming up. If you run lab CLI -CSR, what that does is it will automatically approve any pending certificate signing requests That's likely what has happened. If you shut this down before 24 hours and it automatically regenerates its certificates after the install, or if you shut it down and then don't turn it back on for many days or weeks, you will likely have one or more expired certificates. And while it's booting up, you'll need to run this lab CLI -CSR maybe a few times to catch all of the pending certificate signing requests and get them in place. All right. So now, if you want to go over to Operator Hub, you can start installing operators. You can write code. You can deploy it. This OpenShift cluster is open for business. Thank you for sticking with me through this. I hope you enjoy this. In some future videos, I'll show you some fun and exciting things that you can do with this OpenShift cluster, like install OpenShift dev spaces and actually write and deploy code. Stay tuned and talk to you later.